Welcome back to the Lady K podcast. I'm Katy McKinney, the founder and head of school for Lafayette Academy, a classical school. And today I wanted to talk about recitations. There's a common objection to asking young children to recite poetry or prose. And it usually sounds something like, they don't even know what they're saying. So what's the point anyway? I actually used to teach at a school where the 3 and 4 year olds, my thought was they should say the Pledge of Allegiance. And that was the idea was, well, they don't fully understand what allegiance or republic or indivisible means. And so, true, a kindergartner is not, although we teach our kids the preamble to the Constitution, and they don't necessarily understand even what they're saying or even the structure of American government yet. But a young student who memorizes those things then has them in them, and we can refer to them. We even have our students memorize the 3-minute Gettysburg Address, which they can do. Do they grasp yet all the full meaning of the terrible July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in 1863? No. Do they understand Lincoln's brief but impactful and incredibly memorable speech that he gave? No, they don't understand that. But I would suggest that is not an argument, a strong argument to not do recitations. And actually, I would argue that it's one of the strongest reasons to do it. Children often learn words before they fully understand the meaning of those words. And that is not a flaw in the process. That is the process. Before a child, when they say thank you, they might be 1 before they fully understand the meaning of gratitude, they still can say it. Or they might say, I'm sorry, before they truly understand the meaning of repentance. Or they might say, I love you, before they fully understand the meaning of love. So, or to that end, they'll sing the ABCs before they fully understand phonics or the grammar of the English language. We do not say that these things are meaningless as our children are learning to say and memorize these things. And instead, we understand that the child is being brought into a language, into a habit, into the meaning of being. And so the words come first, and then the deeper understanding grows over time. And so that is why recitation matters, especially when a child is young and they, from an educational standpoint, all of those neurons are firing at full power. These kids can memorize things like crazy. They can do a ton of it, number one. Number two, they can do it extremely fast. And so our kindergartners can learn the preamble to the Constitution usually in about a week. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, blah, blah, blah. That is inspiring. Again, they don't know what they're saying, but as we build over time, by the time they get to 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, they're starting to understand the meaning. And now we can free up their thought from just hearing the words for the first time to really now, let's dive into the meaning of these beautiful words. So in classical education, we're not going to wait for a child to fully explain a truth before we allow him to even carry that truth. We give our children good words, and we do it early, and then we spend years helping them understand what those beautiful words mean. And that gives meaning. It gives a placeholder for those wonderful ideas to land, to then draw from later. Recitation is a very important part of our classical curriculum. And while it trains the memory, yes, it also trains their attention. It trains their focus, their mental governance of their focus. It trains eloquence. It trains their moral imagination. And it teaches them the sound of beautiful language, of well-ordered language. And it gives them, in time as well, examples of courage, perseverance, self-governance, love of country. And that love, whether it's of country or of different individuals, it starts to shape what they love. And that is very, very important. So over the years, some of the things our students have said or have recited are the preamble, as I mentioned, portions of the Declaration of Independence, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, Winston Churchill's beautiful speech, we call it On the Beaches, but that one that he gave to Parliament of courage and resolve that we will never, never, never give up. Theodore Roosevelt's beautiful reflection on citizenship. And this year, our students will memorize Roosevelt's famous, people know it as the Man in the Arena passage. We share these particularly at Veterans Day, but it gives us a wonderful opportunity to start to instill these beautiful passages in their memory that they will have forever. These selections that we've chosen are not accidental. We choose them because they carry a weight with them, and obviously they have endured because they carry with them something about true human nature, about citizenship, about the reflection of responsibility and sacrifice, and the benefits of that virtuous service, and the kind of men and women that we hope our children will want to emulate and want to become. One of my favorite examples of the power of recitation happened years ago, actually, two examples. One was in our own home, which actually caused me to say, wait a minute, this classical education thing is pretty amazing. It was with my own 3 kids. We were in our kitchen, and we were reciting a poem called The Caterpillar by Christina Rossetti. And my oldest, who at the time was in 4th grade, and Colton was in 1st grade, they were memorizing it. It was fine. And my youngest at the time, Payne, was about 2.5. And the two had practiced it, and we had gone over and over, and probably for a week, and they got it. It was beautiful. It's very simple, but it was very sweet. And my 2.5-year-old at the time was like, in his broken English, can I try? And in my thought, I didn't say this out loud, but I was like, sure, I'll humor you. You haven't even said it out loud once. How are you going to actually say it? But, it was fun. Let's try. So he came out and he said it perfectly the first time, having never said it out loud before. And that's when my thought goes, wait a second, there's something different about this classical education, this sort of one-room schoolhouse kind of atmosphere. And he was absorbing things I had no idea. So that was one example of the power of recitation and the practicing of it. Another example of the power of recitation happened in one of our middle school classrooms a few years back. Mr. Keith Preston, our history teacher, was teaching the Civil War. And he was teaching our 7th and 8th graders who, sort of unbeknownst to him, had learned the Gettysburg Address for Veterans Day. And he was talking with them about the Civil War and about those terrible but very defining days on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863, when our nation met itself on the battlefield. And as he began to speak about Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this nation, on this continent, a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He starts to deliver that, and in that moment, the class joined him. And he had not put the text in front of them. He sort of just gently prompted it, but he didn't even know that they really knew it. And because the words were already in them, they took the ball and started running through it, or running with it, and they went through the entire address. He quieted down and just listened to them. His wife happened to be there that day, which was not usual, but it was awesome because she got to experience this as well. She, of course, got tears in her eyes, and the kids felt the weight and the impact of that moment because they had, the beautiful thing about classical education is it's not siloed into these different, subject matters where they're not connected. They're learning this recitation for Veterans Day, but then it shows and it pops up in their history class, and then it might pop up in their literature class. But it was one of those moments that was so beautiful because it was already within them that they were able to share that moment with him and basically be like, we are in complete alignment with you on this moment in history, on this moment that defined who America is today. And they all just sort of stood there in silence after they finished, and it was a moment. It was beautiful. So this is where the idea of history, of language, of reverence, all of that, and recitation, all of that comes together. And it's not simply because the students had memorized a speech, but it was because the speech had become a part of them, and they were loving something that was beautiful, and they were sharing it. That's when we say recitation can be very formative. It's a language of the soul, and it's beautiful. As our children are growing up in a world where words fill the air and words matter, sometimes the words can be careless today. Sometimes they can be shallow. Sometimes they're angry words. Sometimes they're distracted. We want our children to be surrounded by language that is elevated, it teaches them what is worthy. And so intentionally, we give them the words that have done that over humanity, over time. Lincoln's speech in particular teaches about the importance of sacrifice and of humility and of national purpose. We give them the words from the Declaration, which teaches them that human beings have dignity and liberty is not a gift from the government. It is inalienable and it is rooted in something higher and it needs to be protected and defended. We give them the Constitution that teaches them that ordered liberty requires a sense of restraint, of self-government, of structure, and of self-sacrifice. When we give them Churchill's beautiful speech, it teaches them of immense courage and resolve in very, very hard and terrible times when everything looks to be against you. And of course, Roosevelt reminds them in The Man of the Arena that it's not the critic who counts. It's not the guy who's sitting as a spectator. It's the guy in the arena that matters, the one who's willing to strive, to potentially fail, and spend himself in a worthy cause. These are the kinds of words that we want echoing in our children's minds. And yes, this idea of patriotism at Lafayette is one that we believe our children should love the ideals of their country. We don't teach our children to idolize America, but we do teach them that they have inherited this beautiful country, and to do it, we want to do it, inherit it rightly with the idea of gratitude, of honesty, of responsibility and courage, and that we understand this is an experiment. I would say a providential experiment, but an experiment nonetheless, and one that is worth cherishing and participating in. I often talk about the importance of being a participant and not just a spectator. And when you have a classical education focused on the Western tradition, when you understand the best as to what has been said and thought by humanity, I think of it as sort of the best practices of humanity, it allows you to be a participant in that conversation. In any case, this is why recitations matter. Our students recite these words not merely to learn history or to just regurgitate, but because they're entering, as an American, they're entering into an important inheritance. They need to know what has come before. They need to understand the context and why certain decisions were made or not made at the time. And they are being invited into that conversation, the conversation that happened long before they arrived on the scene, and the conversation that will continue long after we're not here. But this is why recitations are so important, so it becomes a part of the fabric of their own thinking. So especially, too, as we approach this year our 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, I think it is a beautiful time for families to actually return and read those words. If you've never read the Declaration of Independence, I highly encourage you to do so sometime this year with your kids, with your families. It's important. It is the idea of they are pledging their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. This is what it means to secure the blessings of liberty. And it's like all worthy inheritances. We must receive them. We want to remember what was sacrificed and then protect it and pass it on. Recitations is something we believe shape what we love. And when students memorize these beautiful and noble words, they carry with them those words forever, and it begins to work on them. It begins to help them grow into who they are becoming. That's why we recite. Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Lady K podcast, I invite you to share it. And as always, great nations are not renewed first in the courts or in the capitals, but in the classrooms, in our families, and in the hearts of our children. And this is how we help preserve the promise of America. Thanks for joining me.